welcome to Arcane Station. I'm your host, Mike Porter. Tonight we are going to North Carolina. So, there's a reason for this. I have just started, or will be starting on August 3rd. I will be starting a new job where I'm a department chair over a university department. And so I will be moving from Texas. I was living in Virginia, and I came back to Texas for a contract, and now I'm going back. And instead of going to Virginia Beach, I am going to North Carolina. And so, just like I've done every time when I move, what I'll do is just do a quick overview of the state I'm going to, and I'm going to probably do this in 3 sections. So, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at cryptids of North Carolina, and then most likely I will move on to, places of high strangeness, and then finally ending up on hauntings, like the most prevalent hauntings in North Carolina. So probably a 3-part series on this as well. We just wrapped up a big 6-part series on altered states of the mind. I hope you're enjoying these series. I find it much more effective to go deeper on these topics to help support what I'm trying to get across. And so sometimes it just has to go across multiple things. That way I can keep it to roughly 30 to 40 minutes, and then I can just go deeper in each section. All right, so before we get started on that, though, I have a couple of announcements that I'd like to make. So the first of which is I've just finished writing my novel. And I know I've said that before, but I also said that I needed to edit it, and I needed to check for content and length, and I've done all of that. So I'm slightly short of the traditional 70,000 to 100,000 words that most commercial novels have. I'm at 60,000 words. But what I wanted to do on this novel is to be fast-paced and cinematic, but also set up a series of books. And so my first book is going to be called American Midnight, The Bayou. American Midnight is the story of a young lady named Midnight Hayes. So this is set in 1984, and she was born and raised in South Korea. And her father was a U.S. Army Special Operations soldier and Vietnam vet who disappeared before she was ever born. And so what she wanted to do is come to the States, immerse herself in the language, so she went to NYU to become a journalist. And after she's graduated, she then sets out to find her father. And the first step along the way is in Louisiana, specifically in a bayou in Louisiana, into a town that's been losing people for decades, and finding out that there's something that's just calling them. And so it's part investigation, part folklore, and part found family. So I'm using real Cajun mythology, and I have a shadow organization that's sort of behind the scenes, and this thing has no congressional oversight. And at the end, there's a choice that someone must make that they're not expected to make, or they lose something when they do, right? So I hope you'll enjoy the story. I'm going to finish up doing the cover, and I'll post that at some point, and then what I'll do is start taking pre-orders so I can get it all printed and sent out, and the pre-orders will have a signed copy of that. So I hope you'll enjoy that. So that's my first announcement. The second announcement is that I found out that my email server wasn't working as it should. So if you have tried to send me an email message, or you've tried to get in contact with me and it didn't go through, I want to apologize. I think I fixed the problem now, and I should be able to receive emails, and you should be able to send them again, and I should actually be able to accept them. I think I've solved all the problems. So, hopefully, fingers crossed, that's sorted out and working correctly. Now, the final announcement is that I will be moving probably July 23rd. So you'll get this upcoming Saturday. So in a couple of weeks, I'll be moving to North Carolina. My new job starts August 3rd, and I'm going to need a little bit of time to get acclimated. I'm moving into a position where I'm managing and also building content, and so I may be a little bit slow on my YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok messages, and specifically my shorts. I try to get as much done as I can ahead of time to have like 3 or 4 weeks ahead, but I may not be able to do that this time, so I'm going to apologize for that. So once I get settled into my job, I'm hopeful I can kick right back into high gear and just bash out some content for y'all so you can enjoy the video shorts. All right, so let's get started on the cryptids of North Carolina. So the first category I want to look through is Cherokee era accounts. So a lot of this is pre-contact, so before the U.S. was a nation and before there was any colonies here. The Cherokee, dominated North Carolina, and they had these oral traditions of these creatures or beings that were in the land around them. So the first one is Tsul Kalu, which is, I guess you could sort of anglicize that to Juticula. And basically, the location of this is in Juticula Rock in Jackson County near Chiloui. And there's also Devil's Courthouse, which is the Blue Ridge Parkway in Transylvania, Jackson County line. And this creature allegedly is there in that area. And Juticula Rock has these petroglyphs, which archaeologists have gone and taken a look at, and they have this being associated with Juticula Rock, carved into this through petroglyphs. And what it depicts is a giant around 7 feet tall with 7 fingers on each hand and 7 toes on each foot. And the saying is that it could leap mountaintop to mountaintop, so massive giant that could leap between peaks. They also said that this was a master of game animals, so basically like a god of all different game animals. And you had to ask for permission to Juticula to go hunting. Specifically, if you were a Cherokee, you had to invoke these Cherokee hunting rites in order to appease Juticula. And the evidence of this is, again, 1,500 plus petroglyphs carved into the Juticula Rock soapstone boulder. So there's also said to be the impression of his hands and fingernails when he leapt from the mountain to the valley below. Now there's another section called Devil's Courthouse, and that's like a mountainous area, and basically the tradition said that this was the seat of judgment for Juticula, where there's a mountain peak called Devil's Courthouse, and below that there's a chamber, and they're saying that this was the chamber where Juticula would preside over your case if you were to or he would apply his judgment to you if he felt that you had wronged him. Okay, so this is a physical location, has the rock art, and this is an oral tradition, so there's no written documentation about it, but there's this folklore that has been repeated throughout time by the Cherokee. Now the next thing is Utulnata, Spearfinger. So in the Chiloui Mountain region, in the Little Tennessee River corridor, Natala passes and the Whiteside Mountain, and also in Jackson County. Now Jackson County is the preferred home of Spearfinger. And basically, back in the 1890s, there was a man named James Mooney who talked to the Cherokee and received the oral traditions and wrote this down in a book called The Myths of the Cherokee. Now, the description of Spearfinger was a shape-shifting witch, usually appearing as an old woman, and she had a body of stone and a spear-like forefinger that she used to kill and extract victims' livers. And arrows would reportedly shatter on her skin. So again, this is only oral tradition. But basically what this functioned as was sort of like a cautionary tale, basically telling the kids, don't wander alone and don't trust strangers. So there's been no physical sighting record in the modern sense, but again, this is folkloric, and it could just be a cautionary tale or a fable for children. What's interesting is it reminds me, that long forefinger reminds me of an eye, which is a type of tree. I think they're a New World monkey, and they use this long forefinger to dig grubs out of trees. But that spearfinger thing reminded me of the eye's long finger. All right, the next thing is the moon-eyed people. So this is in Murphy, Cherokee County, and surrounding southern Appalachia. And this is a legend that describes the people that were said to predate the Cherokee in the region. So they don't have a physical date or a fixed date for these things. Now, there was a physical artifact that was recovered in 1841. And what this was a stone that had, it's like a stone effigy that had two conjoined flat-faced figures, and he found this in the property, like as he was tilling his land, he found this on his property near Murphy, and it's currently on display at the Cherokee County Historical Museum. And basically, it shows these small, pale-skinned people with big moon eyes. But the description of people talking about these, the Cherokee were talking about these moon-eyed people. They would say that they were small, they had beards, they were pale-skinned, and their eyes were so light-sensitive that they moved only at night. So 18th and 19th century European writers, including a Jefferson-era reference and a Lewis and Clark journal note, grafted a Welsh Indians theory onto this legend, basically saying that there was a man from Wales who came to the Americas prior to Columbus, and basically was accepted into this group of Cherokees where their intermingling created these moon-eyed people. Now that seems to me like there would need to be some sort of genetic anomalies taking place for that light sensitivity, like incest or interbreeding, over a period of time. So I don't know if this is an accurate story, but the light sensitivity makes sense if that were the case. All right, so I'm going to move from these beings and more into like actual cryptids. And this is sort of like the Appalachian cat or an ape-like type creatures that we're going to. So the first is the Wampus Cat. So this is in southern Appalachian mountain regions or counties, and it's documented in North Carolina's Piedmont district. So I think that's a sort of a plains area. And basically this is another Cherokee-rooted legend, but the specifics of this are is that a woman was cursed because she was watching or engaging in a ritual that she was not allowed to be at. So there was some sort of ritual taking place, and she covered herself with a mountain lion skin and crawled up close by to watch this ceremony. And when she did, and she was captured by the elders, and she was cursed to be this sort of creature called the Wampus Cat. So all throughout the 1930s, there were lots of references of the Wampus Cat by name because there was a massive amount of animal and livestock kills that were reported. Dogs being taken, farmers' dogs being taken, bunnies taken from their hutches, goats with their heads crushed. And the the number of deaths, number of animal deaths was massive at the time, but there was also lots of different types of deaths. There was like heads being crushed and blood being sucked and ripped apart and all this other stuff. So there was loads and loads of different types of animal deaths, which could have been attributed to different animals taking these creatures, these dogs, the goats, and all that stuff. It could have been a variety of animals that were predating the domestic animals, but they all attributed the deaths to this Wampus Cat. So, like I said, there was this woman spying on the ceremony, which is the modern folklore version of this older Cherokee ceremonial practice. So this wasn't an actual verbatim, like citing from oral tradition. This was people, like, I think, making up a story around the Wampus Cat after the fact, not during the Cherokee time frame, but afterwards. Now, the next creature is more familiar to everyone. It's called Normie, but basically this is, by all intents and purposes, a Bigfoot. So the location of the sightings were in the Uwharrie region, which is in the North Carolina foothills, and this is also associated with the Cleveland County area inside of North Carolina. So these claims trace all the way back to the early 20th century, and a bulk of the documented sightings were happening mainly around the 1970s onwards. So right after the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is 1967, people started seeing these creatures all over. And again, it's a classic bipedal ape-man Sasquatch type profile that people were talking about, which was this giant, heavily built, hairy man that was moving around bipedally. And this is local lore, so it's like a regional Bigfoot variant rather than like a single incident. So this is local folklore, and it's sort of an aggregation of like a massive amount of these sightings. I think there's like 167 sightings if you go to BFRO looking into North Carolina, and many of the sightings are around that region. There's also a creature called the Boojum. Now, this is in Haywood County, Great Smoky Mountains, and specifically near Told Mountain in the Shining Rock Wilderness. So this is like an early 20th century legend as well, and this is the oral tradition of a mountain giant, which, the Cherokees talked about previously, but the newer version, again, starts around 1967 onward. And the description is this 7-foot-tall, shaggy creature, but what's interesting about this is completely different than most Bigfoot sightings. They feel like this is sort of like an eccentric type of wild man, which is drawn to shiny objects, but also likes to watch women bathing in the streams and mountains, these mountain pools or these streams. And it's not being a predator and like attacking these women. It's just watching, curious. Now, there's no real dated recorded sightings, but again, this feels more folklore rather than incident-based. So when it says it's this Bigfoot creature that watches women bathe, this feels more like it's a, like a fable or an allegory or a warning rather than actual sightings. So now we're going to get into Bigfoot proper. So Uwharrie Beast, or the North Carolina Bigfoot. So Uwharrie National Forest, which is Montgomery, Randolph, and Davison counties. Montgomery County alone accounts for 15 of the state's BFRO reports, and it's the most of any county. But statewide, I think there's 107 BFRO listed reports across 45 different counties, right? So North Carolina ranks 17th nationally for Bigfoot reports. So in the 1870s, in Craven County, there was a swamp monster account of a 5-foot-tall creature that attempted to abduct 2 children. So the swamp monster, wild man, hairy man, mountain devil, forest devil, sort of designations are all over the newspapers from the 1800s, all the way up until like 1967 when Bigfoot actually became the word to use. If you go back and look at old newspapers, you'll see devil, mountain devil spotted, hairy man spotted, wild man spotted, right? And they talk about these creatures in that respect prior to Bigfoot. So, people say, well, nobody really saw a Bigfoot before 1967. That is not true. There's oral traditions from every indigenous tribe that talk about a people, a tribe of beings that are hairy and forest giants, every single one of them. And there's also all of the newspaper reports that are just calling them something different than Bigfoot. Okay, so in the late 70s, a cluster of Uwharrie forest sightings. Again, they talk about an ape-like figure, unusual vocalization, and oversized print, Bigfoot. In 2009, researcher Michael Green reports a creature approaching his tent at night in the Uwharrie forest, and he captured thermal imaging footage of an animal taking bait that he had set out. In August of 2017, Bigfoot 911 research team, which is led by John E. Bruner, reports a nighttime encounter in McDowell County. And he said it was a large bipedal, hair-covered figure with a bare, dark face. So people, when they talk about Bigfoot, they typically talk about dark gray or black skin, and that makes me think that this is what he's talking about, this sort of like dark gray or black colored skin. In 2019, in the town of Marion, which is in McDowell County, they reported Bigfoot sightings all around there, but specifically in 2019, they declared Bigfoot its official animal, the official town animal. This is very similar to Jefferson County, Texas, or Jefferson, Texas. They've called themselves the Bigfoot capital of Texas, and they have several events every year, but the main one is the Texas Bigfoot Conference, and that's being run by Craig Woolheater. And he talks about, he's set up quite an ecosystem there, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. Jefferson's a beautiful place to visit. That Bigfoot event, they usually pull in people like Ken Gerhard, Lyle Blackburn, so there's loads and loads of people that are coming to these events. I've met quite a few of people, like Bigfoot celebrities through Craig's events. So I highly recommend to go into one. And I'm hopeful that there's some really good events in North Carolina that I will be absolutely attending. All right. So Michael Green, he said that creature passed directly over his tent. I'm not sure if that was jumping over or just walking nearby and the shadow went over his tent. And again, like I said, he found this, or he captured this thermal camera imaging of this creature taking the bait that he had laid out. All right, so mostly Montgomery County and Uwharrie is where most of those encounters happen. So I think that's a really interesting cluster, and I'm going to take a look when I get there. I'm hoping to go visit myself and take a look. Right, so now we have a completely different sort of thing. So this is the Beast of Bladenboro. And this is very similar to the Wampus Cat in that there's loads and loads of animal attacks. So the location of this is Bladenboro and Clarkton in Bladen County. There's also a big swamp area, and then the Robeson Memorial Hospital in Robeson County there was an event that happened very close to there as well. So December 29th of 1953, there's this first attack in Clarkton, which is 8 miles from Bladenboro. There's a dog that's killed. In December 31st of 1953, 2 dogs are found dead in Bladenboro near kennels, and there's heavy blood loss. Like they don't have a lot of blood in their system, but there's blood everywhere. January 1st through 7th in 1954, there's near daily livestock or pet deaths. There's dogs, rabbits, goats are all being killed. In January 13th of 1954, a bobcat killed by Luther Davis in Big Swamp declared the Beast by Mayor Fussell. 2 additional animals killed the same day by Bruce Soules and Barry Lewis. So they were thinking that a bobcat was the actual Beast of Bladenboro. December 15th and 16th, 1954, there's pigs and chickens killed near the Robeson Memorial Hospital, and there's crushed skulls and no blood. So clearly this is not a bobcat that's crushing the skulls of a pig or anything like that. And so the description is inconsistent of what this thing might be. Some people say it's a feline, like a mountain lion. Some people say it's dog-like. Some say it's bear-like or panther-like. But they're saying that it's 20 inches tall, 20 inches long to 5 feet long, and the reports are estimated that it's between 80 and 90 pounds based on tracks and claw marks, which are over an inch long. So some of the eyewitness testimony of this, Johnny Voss, which was the dog owner of the December 31st, 1953 incident, he said, "My dogs put up a good fight. There was blood all over the porch, big puddles of it. The top one of the dog's head was torn off and its body was crushed." That is not a bobcat. Dalton Norton, which was a young resident, in January 6th of 1954, reported a big cat on his porch that made a crying noise like a baby crying. 1954, January 5th, C.E. Kinlaw described a big mountain lion charging towards her, fled when she screamed, and she said that the tracks at the scene were bigger than a silver dollar, which doesn't seem like it's a very big cat, to be honest with you. So that really doesn't make sense why it doesn't sound like a mountain lion to me at all, and it doesn't sound very big. Unnamed local person, this is printed account, basically said it was about 20 inches high, a long tail about 14 inches long, and a face exactly like a cat, though larger than any cat previously seen. So the best documented cases, was Mayor Fussell's declared, basically he said that the resolution to the Beast of Bladenboro was the death of this 25-pound bobcat. But it doesn't match the track or the injury evidence. And Fussell had a financial interest. He ran the local theater, booked a monster movie screening at the height of the panic. So he had a real conflict of interest. Basically, he wanted to enhance the reports as opposed to disqualifying the reports because he could sell more tickets for his horror movie monster screening. So what the modern theories are is that this was a transient cougar. So it's pretty unusual for mountain lions to be in the region, but it's not impossible. There are transient, individual mountain lions that could be wandering when they're pushed out of a region due to, they have these ranges that they live in, and they're pretty solitary, and they mark those territories. And sometimes they're pushed out of territories, and they just wander around until they find a new territory. So that transience is documented and happens, right? But it could also be a large wolf domestic dog hybrid, which typically will make them much larger than either one individually, very much like a liger, because there's like a suppression gene when they're together, but when a tiger is with a tiger, a lion's with a lion, but when they're a lion and tiger are together, there's the suppression of the size gene takes place, and they become larger than they should usually. All right, so I'm going to move from mountain creatures to the water cryptids. So there's a place called Lake Norman, which is north of Charlotte, and they have a creature named Normie. And the reason why this is kind of weird is because the lake is a created lake. It was created in 1963 when the Cowens Ford Dam took place and was built, and Duke Power sort of built that. But the reports began in mid-1960s and continue to today. And the description is that it's a serpentine, 50-plus foot, horse-headed creature that has glowing eyes or a large fin. So multiple fishermen and boaters have since the 1960s been reporting this creature. So what I think it could be, there's different types of creatures that are in there. So there could be a large flathead catfish that's quite large. Like catfish can get 6-7 feet long in the right conditions. Could be an escaped or released alligator. Could be an eastern hellbender. Now those are salamanders, so they don't get that large, which would not make sense, but they do have some interesting coloration, so that could be something that people are seeing. And some people are saying, in theory, that the McGuire nuclear station has deposited some nuclear waste in there, and this creature is a nuclear mutation. Surely that's not accurate, but that's sort of like the mythology around it. I don't know what that could be. I feel like because it's a newly created lake, you're not going to get some sort of like sea serpent or some sort of creature that's been there forever, unless the weight of this dam opened up, or maybe the caves opened up that were underneath and allowed something else to come up from the depths of a cave that would have been unknown or unrecognized previously. I'm not sure. Now, on the outer banks in the Atlantic waters, there is this sea serpent called Willie, and this is specifically around the Wilmington, Cape Fear area. And in 1524, Giovanni da Verrazzano's voyage journal, he talked about this sea serpent there, off the outer banks. And it's also, ship captain reports through the 19th and 20th centuries. So it's a large, multi-humped, coiled serpentine animal with a horse-like head, dark scales, and Verrazzano's 1524 journal entry, this is a second-hand sighting because a crew member told him about this, talked about this creature out in the Atlantic. So basically, I think it's probably seeing the waves, like looking like a coiled creature, or it could be they have these very long ribbon fish. Could have been something like that. So I find that really interesting. Now, something that's relatively new, this is a completely different category altogether. Something relatively new is this pale crawler that took place recently. This is in July 21st. There's the Pender County pale crawler, and you've probably heard the audio of the guy saying, "That's not human, that's not human." So basically, what happened is this guy was driving home between 10:45 and 11 p.m. and he called 911. He said there's this guy on the side of the road who's bleeding, and he thought it was somebody dressed in Civil War garb as a reenactor. And he said that and then he saw this creature that had red streaks on the torso and staring silently as the truck passed. And then about 30 seconds later, while he was still on the phone, the witness reported an audible thump, and you can hear it in the truck bed, and something climbing in, and he described a white face with sunken eyes and skin stretched over the skull, and an excessively thin, scrawny body that he said was roughly 7 feet tall when it stood up. So he screamed, like I said, "It's not human, it's not human." And the dispatcher, he told the dispatcher that this thing was not a turkey. It was pale, light-colored, no feathers. So this is probably the best verified pale crawler documented anywhere, because you hear the audio. There is a police chief that talks about the guy being scared. Now, it could be that there was a bear or a deer with mange that could have jumped into the car. I doubt it. But, like I said, when you hear that, that's absolutely insane sounding. Now, there's also one more, which is the Youngsville woodline crawler. So this took place in, what was it? Like roughly, I don't know. I think there was an article published in April of 26, but this happened probably 3 to 5 years prior to that. So basically what happened is one winter in 3 phases, monthly, roughly 1 to 2 months apart, there was this mimicked child voices calling for help from the woods. And they said that there was no missing children reported in the area. And then they heard this inhuman screech independently weeks later. And then he saw a pale whitish gray humanoid figure which was moving on all fours in the tree line at night. He said the legs were bent inward, and it had a smooth, featureless head with no visible face. And it said the legs were like a dog, but more bent inwards. It didn't seem like it had a face. The head was smooth and pale. And a neighbor independently reported matching experiences, both the voices and the humanoid figure, at his own property's edge around the same period. So, very weak in terms of source material for this, but I think it's pretty interesting that it could be some sort of, again, mangy animal or an albino animal. It could be a coyote. The owls could be the vocalizations that they were hearing. So I find that really interesting. So overall, I think, I'm super excited to be moving to North Carolina and finding out more about the state itself. Super interested in going to any sort of events, cryptid, all that other stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, so that's a quick recap of all the different types of creatures recounted in North Carolina and where they're located. The next one will be about places of high strangeness, and I'll go deeper into, the into the rock of what's it called? I'll have to find it again really quickly. So I'll go back into the courthouse. So there's a couple of different ones. There's the Devil's Courthouse, and then there's Courthouse Rock, I believe. But anyway, I'll be going into the locations that are of high strangeness and try to provide more information there. And then the last one will be, like I said, about the spirits or paranormal activity that takes place there. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm going to deep dive on North Carolina a bit more, and then I'll move on to other topics. Have a wonderful evening. Follow me if you can on any of my social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. Arcane Station podcast is typically how you can find me. All right, have a wonderful evening.